Listeners, welcome to this week's Tales of Abundance, Why Settle for Less? As always, thank you for joining us. And as always, I'm here with Anthony and Dr. John. Gentlemen, how are we doing today?
Doing great today.
Yeah?
Well, I'm excited about today's topic. This will be fun.
Yeah, our guest is returning guest, Kristian Jalloway. We are going to be talking about some other crazy Randy questions in the Bible, and particularly focusing on the book of Revelation. But before we get to that, let's get to the abundance briefing and the Super Bowl. So Anthony, congratulations are in order. For those of you who don't know, Anthony is a Patriots fan. And as if you haven't had enough success in the last couple decades, they are going back to the Super Bowl to play the Seahawks. So, Anthony, congratulations. Not that you did anything, but...
it's no, I did. I moved a little bit on the couch, and I made when they scored the first touchdown, I was typing on my computer, so I put my computer away, and things got better after that. So I'm taking some credit for that, and I'm also thanking the cold front that came down late in the third quarter and made football an impossible task for any human being. Could have used Elon's robots, I guess, to replace the humans on that field, because those guys couldn't see, they couldn't hear, they couldn't run. There was a situation where one of the defenders on Denver was in his 3-point stance, and his hand slid forward and he fell into the neutral zone. I mean, it was a comedy of errors. And
yeah, I don't know that I've ever seen a game where the weather got that bad that fast.
Yeah,
it went from relatively decent conditions to really, really poor quickly. So, well, let's jump into some of the economics of the game, things that, every year the Super Bowl comes out and you hear how expensive everything is, right? I mean, it is the most expensive commercials, the biggest, attention grabbing, etc. 30-second commercial for this Super Bowl, between $7 and $8 million for a 30-second commercial. So basically a 1-minute commercial, we're talking 15 million. John, you're shaking your head. What?
I don't want to pour gas on this fire, but I think it used to be $2 million for a 30-second spot. I'm just glad we're not seeing inflation.
Yeah, it's 2%. That's what they tell us. I know. Yes. So, I mean, it's amazing to
people gladly pay it. I mean, they've got it. They're sold out, I'm sure, very far in advance, and everybody wants one of these, and everyone looks forward to it. They're the best commercials of the year.
If I remember right, I don't think they did sell out last year. I think they were a few short a year ago, but usually they are. But okay, so best commercials of the year. Have you guys been impressed with the Super Bowl commercials the last couple of years?
I have not. Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't found it to be really that memorable relative to decades past, like the What's Up one with, I think Pepsi did that one, and I think the Clydesdales ones are usually pretty memorable for Budweiser. And then, but what's been your favorite of all time?
I don't know. I mean, the Doritos one, there's a lot of the Doritos ones that really made me laugh. I mean, for me, generally, it's they're going to laugh. But yeah, some of the Budweiser Clydesdale ones have been really good.
Oh, my God. You guys, you're too young, man.
And
Cindy Crawford's Pepsi commercial.
I remember.
I mean, come on. That is sitting at the top of the list. There's one, and then there's everything else.
Wow.
It's just amazing. Yeah.
I think when you see those shows, the one that's always at the top is the Mean Joe Green Coke one. And I remember, so when I was a kid, my mom drank a lot of Coke, and there was something you would get off the packages, I think when you bought a 12-pack or whatever, and you would put them together, and my mom drank Coke, and I was like, drink more Coke, I need this. I wasn't a Steelers fan, I didn't like the Steelers, I was a Viking fan, but I wanted that damn Mean Joe Green jersey, and eventually, my mom spent $1 zillion on Coke to get me the $10 jersey or whatever that they sent in the mail. So, I mean, I do remember that as being a very effective marketing campaign. And that makes me wonder, some of these commercials, and I see them, and you watch, the one that comes to mind, there were several years ago, Master Lock, whatever, I think it's, John, when commercials were like $1 million, or maybe it was $2 million, and whatever a commercial was almost exactly their annual advertising budget. and they ran one Super Bowl commercial, and they never ran one again. And they saw, I forget the numbers now, I'd have to look it up, but it was like a 20 or 30% drop in sales because that commercial did not work as well as what they were doing previous, or even, even close to it. So I wonder, how does Pepsi and Doritos and these companies, I mean, how do they really track, or, and know?
Well, let me give you some marketing stuff. I'll give you an example of one of the commercials that literally launched the company, and it's as famous for the provocative nature of it. But GoDaddy was a completely unknown company, and today, and almost immediately there, and this is, GoDaddy. This was in the mid 2000s. This is before people were building websites and getting URLs and so on and so forth en masse. Like today, I have URLs from my grandkids. They each have their own website. So that was revolutionary. But let me give you some math. When you advertise, one of the key metrics that you look at is if I spend $100, what's my cost per thousand people that are gonna see this commercial? And in the home improvement business, we were shooting for between $15 and $30 per thousand people that were going to see our commercials. Okay, a Super Bowl ad now, an $8 million Super Bowl ad is going to reach 100 million people. That's about $30 per thousand. So when you do that math, it takes $8 million plus what's missing from your account. The $8 million is the cost of creating the commercial. I might spend $10,000 in a home improvement business to create a commercial. These guys hire, celebrities, and they're put
Yeah.
together so they're spending probably, you know, $3 to $5 million to put the commercial together. So their cost per thousand is probably a little bit higher. But there is an economic reason to do it.
So wait a
You
minute,
know,
But
for
and
your
those
home
100 million people
improvement,
have to be your. So the 100 million has to be the whole audience, right? And so the
yeah.
cost is you have to look. Yeah. So it's
so wait,
interesting math.
in the home improvement, what was the number you were shooting for?
It depends on the channel, but you could to say typically 20 to $30 per million for a local TV ads here in Austin, Texas. We were paying $30 per thousand.
Okay. Well,
Pretty typical.
yeah, it seems like a better deal than paying 30 to a Super Bowl commercial to me that targets everybody in the country. However, the other advantage to these, if they're good commercials, they get replayed and they become a little bit of a social media thing as well. But that's the winners. That's
Next
not all of them.
next week, in probably Monday or Tuesday of next week, all these commercials will be released on YouTube. And in addition to that 100 million, they're going to have tens of millions of views. And you can't underestimate what awareness does. You know, so
Now
it seems.
that's the economics. That's the economics, Anthony, of the ad. But there's a whole nother side to the Super Bowl that is a lot more opaque to me, and that is the economics of like what happens in the city in the moment. Like I went to a national championship game for football, 20 years ago, and it was amazing to me what a production it was. I knew it was gonna be a big production, but it was like Big and Rich were playing outside the stadium for a thing, and there was a whole like outside. I mean, it was a whole event. It was bigger than any carnival like state fair that I've been to in terms of just how many things were there. The ticket pricing was what it was. Randy, I mean, what do you know about like the local economics and what happens to that local community for the Super Bowl?
I mean, I've heard numbers. They always throw around. I don't have what it's expected to bring to San Francisco, to Levi or whatever it's called now. It's got a new name, I think, but to the stadium and to that area. But it's a lot, right? There's not just people going to the game like a normal game, but there is a ton of media and there's a ton of people that just come for the party, right? And all of those events. Like I'm guessing that it's triple the attendance of what a normal game would be to fill that stadium. I have no idea if it's double, triple, or 10x, but I'm just going to guess it's triple. So you're
Yeah.
bringing money and you're bringing a lot of big money. There's a lot of corporate money at the Super Bowl, more than Unfortunately, a lot of the fans that go all the time don't get there because, big corporations take up a lot of the seats, but that also brings more money to the city, to the stadium, to the team, etc.
Well, it's actually, I'm looking at Santa Clara, first of all, is where the Super Bowl is, not San Francisco, but they call it, the Bay Area cluster. And they're estimating the economic activity, top line impact, is going to be between 4 and $700 million. And the public sector cost to, to have security and all of that is about 25 million. So that's not a bad ROI. So
It's really,
and
yeah,
not
that's fantastic. It's great for the Bay Area, right? Not great for the cities that those people are leaving because it actually, I don't know how you would even begin to track this, but you're losing economic activity wherever those people are coming from as well. So, but it's good for the host for sure. And by the way, Anthony, you were saying 100 million people. They estimate 110 to 120 million people
yeah.
just in the U.S. By the way, that's not worldwide,
Oh
as
wow.
but just in the
Yeah.
U.S., 110 to 120 million people.
Yeah,
Which,
I was just looking for the order of magnitude. I was curious because I did not know the answer, so I was curious. So I did the math, and
yeah.
yeah, I mean
Well,
these companies are not dumb.
yeah.
They're very calculated. So
Well, and let's wrap it up with this. Average ticket prices are expected to be
please,
$7,000 to $9,000 right now.
yeah, I'm an avid fan, and I looked yesterday, and I just, you know, my game plan was gonna be. I had a game plan, believe it or not. I was gonna fly into Oakland early, go up to wine country because it's only 80 miles from wine country down to Santa Clara. You can come in the back way too, and go to the game, then go back to wine country for a couple of days, and then come home. I had it all planned out. And then I saw $9,000 for a ticket that wasn't in the in the last row of the end zone, and so I'll be sitting home.
With a really nice bottle of wine, I hope.
Yeah, at least one. But gee whiz, it's a bit sad, that the the what really drives the NFL isn't the elite, right? It's the working class, the middle class, upper middle class, lower class that's the fandom. That's the guy. Those are the people buying the T-shirts and the jerseys but this really just it's so elitist what these prices do that it drives that fan away. It's just terrible. So
Follow the money.
Nothing says abundance and hope like that, Anthony.
There you go.
yeah, yeah, it's look. I've been to many Super Bowls, both Patriots and otherwise, and I've been very fortunate to go. And it's really an exciting, nerve-wracking. Well, you've been to a national championship game, so it's the tension in the room and the stadium is just palpable. It's tremendous. The energy is fantastic, and you see the two different colors of people, and it's exciting. It's great to go, and it's too bad that not many rank and file can make it. So yes, I'm sorry to end on a bad note, but you know, I'd like to see more abundance for people in that strata, if you will. So.
All right. Well, listeners, we will be back after the break with Kristian Jalloway, and we will look forward to digging into that conversation and going deeper into the Bible and some questions there. Hey, it's Randy from Tales of Abundance. Is starting a business part of your journey? Do you have ambition but no clear path? Maybe you feel trapped in your current career. Do you want a real business that can produce $250,000 or more income for you and your family? We have an opportunity for a profitable business that can be part of your path to abundance. I want to personally invite you to see the proven system we've built. It's designed to give you that freedom and control you've been searching for. Visit premiumcabinets.com/abundance to learn more. That's premiumcabinets.com/abundance.
Here at Tales of Abundance, we know that fitness is just as important as money or milestones. It's one of our key 5 F's, but lots of other things. Taking care of my body while I build my life is one of the more time-consuming and difficult goals to chase. That's why we're partnering with AG1. It's a daily drinkable habit. Less than a minute, that's formulated with 75 plus vitamins and nutrients and designed to support energy, digestion, and immune defense. It even has a few grams of protein that we're all chasing these days. And if you want to try it with our affiliate link, you'll also receive a free AG1 flavor sampler, plus vitamin D3 plus K2 with your welcome kit when you first subscribe, a $72 value. Go to shop.drinkag1.com/tales.
Listeners, welcome back from the break. We're here with Tales of Abundance. I'm still here with Anthony and John. And we have returning guest today, Kristian Jalloway, which, if you saw the best of the year, was my favorite episode that we've done so far. Was the first one where I asked Kristian a whole bunch of goofy questions, like how tall were giants in the Bible? How did Noah fit all those animals on the ark? And a bunch of other things like that I was curious about, right? And he and I have had great conversations. And, I said this before, I'm going to repeat it again. One of the things I really, really respect and appreciate about Kristian is his open-mindedness. That we can talk about topics, he can bring these. I mean, Kristian, if you recall, is a ex-Catholic priest, has very strong faith, and we can talk about things in those terms. But then when I ask, this bush that Moses saw the Ten Commandments could have been, basically a DMT trip. I don't think he thinks so, but he's willing to, explore that or be open to it, which to me is just really, really refreshing in the world today. So, Kristian, the questions I have for today, and I think Anthony and John will have some of their own, they're more toward Revelations and the book of Revelations. And I don't know that I've ever had a very good grasp of that. So I think of the Bible, there's a lot of ancient history. I don't know if it's long enough ago to be ancient history. I think of ancient history more tens or hundreds of thousands of years, but a couple thousand years even in the New Testament is pretty old, and almost as a guide for life, right? Like it's, one of the things I've always thought is even if people aren't Christian, if they read the Bible, there's a lot of good advice in there. It's kind of like the first self-help book that, a lot of people have. Then there's Revelations. So let's just start. What the hell is the book of Revelations? Like, what's the purpose? Why is it so different? Just, what is that thing?
Yeah. Basically, it is looking more towards the future. And, now, 2,000 years after Jesus, we consider it to be far down the road somewhere. So it's thinking about, okay, with the end of times, what is that going to look like? Although it's funny, historically, the early Christians assumed that Jesus would come back within their own lifetime. So actually, St. Paul at some point has to tell them, hey, you guys need to get back to work. Everybody was just bumming around thinking Jesus is going to come back. Why build a business? Why do anything? Let's just sit here and pray and try to be, holy. So when he comes back, we'll be chosen. And St. Paul's like, no, get back to work. So this gradual change came where we didn't understand Revelation is like, this is going to happen immediately like they did, to this is sometime down the road. And it's funny, like every generation of Christians seems to think that theirs is going to be the end time, or at least some do. You always see some guy out there in the plaza, wherever, in the street corner, with his soapbox, and he's out there preaching the end times. So it's been happening ever since the beginning of Christianity. But essentially, it is a book that tells us how to. It's supposed to be for the people. So I think we talked about this a little bit on the first podcast. Like it was largely symbolic, and so it was like the part of the Bible that was for the common people to understand in terminology that was very symbolic, that most people at the time of Jesus probably understood pretty easily. And a lot of that has been lost over history. But it's like all of the Bible.
Revelations was the part that was symbolic and people
Correct.
understood it easily?
Correct. Yeah.
So, okay, hold. Yeah, Revelation's got to be the most challenging Bible book for me personally. Christian,
Yeah.
Randy, can we just take one quick little aside about translation and interpretation and how the Bible has kind of gone? Because there, oftentimes I'll hear a priest say like, "Well, this word could mean this, but it could mean that," but and they kind of walk through all the challenges we have with translating the Bible. So, as part of the reason I'm having trouble reading through Revelation, the fact that translation is hard, or take me through that for just a minute.
Yeah, yeah. So the very first thing is that most of the Bible was written in, or the New Testament, right? So there's the Old Testament, which is kind of the Jewish Bible, essentially, written in Hebrew and various things. But talking about the New Testament, most of it was written in Greek, a large portion of it. Some of it was written in Hebrew, various authors over various time frames. There's a whole bunch of study that goes into that. But definitely what we're reading in English today is a translation, sometimes translations of translations, because it is sometimes translated from the Greek to Latin, then to English. And so modern translations have gone back to the original. But there's always, in translation, there's always a changing. You can't have a perfect translation ever. It's necessarily something's lost. I think some preachers go back and try to understand the original language and talk about that, but sometimes it kind of gets, even for me that like studied a lot of this, it's kind of confusing when you're listening to a sermon. He's like, it could have 5 different meanings. You're like, look, it's a little bit over my head, even for a Sunday. When you have 10 minutes to try to tell you something that's going to be helpful for my week. So that's definitely part of the problem.
So Revelations was written in Greek or Hebrew?
Mostly Greek. So there's a lot of Hebrew type phrases, but it's thought that it was written by St. John the Apostle, who was one of the 12 apostles of Jesus, the only one who wasn't martyred, who wasn't killed, ironically or interestingly. But anyways, but it was probably in what they would call Koine Greek, which was it was the scholarly Greek. So even though, English today is the kind of the language of the empire, in that time it was Latin, was what everybody spoke because the Greeks, the Romans were in charge. But Koine Greek was what, even in Rome, the philosophers were teaching the children of the emperor, right? They were learning Greek as the philosophical language of the time. And so that's what John used. So even in that, he was writing it in Greek, but he was translating in his head really from a lot of the Hebrew thought and things that were being said, right? But it's not a book about the story of Jesus like the four Gospels is. It's a book that's trying to talk about. He's really addressing the 7 different churches. So he's addressing the Christian diaspora at that point that are in 7 major churches across mostly the Middle East, really, all the way into Greece, though, and in Rome, and talking to them about what it means to be a Christian in today's world, in their world.
Revelation,
and he's calling them out.
Talking about in their world then, you're saying, when it was written?
Correct. So now you can look at it, again, they all took it to mean, oh, the end times are coming. So there's all these symbols about, but it's really the struggle between good and evil. Like, this is a really interesting book when you look at it between, they're trying to be Christians and live this Christian lifestyle in that time frame, which was the Roman emperor, the Roman Empire, all these different religions, all these different groups and religious sects and groups from all over the empire that had been brought back to Rome. And John is telling them essentially, like, you guys have to be faithful to what Jesus told us. You guys you're going off, this end and that way and following all these different people, and you got to get back to what Jesus told us. So, even imagine whatever this was, 60, 70, 100 years after Jesus, they're already having issues, right? No surprise, it's tough to do it today as time goes along. But every generation has seen this, and I think people today too say, like, oh, this symbol, the 666, this Antichrist, like the Antichrist is whoever. Take the person you don't like today. It's going to be the Antichrist is Trump, or the Antichrist is, Biden or the Antichrist is whoever it is you don't like. And so people have seen this kind of replaying itself again every single generation. So it's hard to say, it's just hard to say with any certainty that, and in fact, I think it's impossible to say, like, the book of Revelation is saying the end times are actually this date, 2000, whatever. The truth is, we don't know, right? Because everybody's tried to say that and it's never worked.
So, okay. I guess the way I thought about Revelations is probably just wrong, because I thought about it more as predictions in the future and where we're going. And I guess one of my questions was, what happened from, we got like 2,000 years that just get, if we're going to have ancient history and we're going to have the future, I just didn't quite understand why the middle wasn't filled in. But you're saying that my thinking about it as something in the future is maybe not completely incorrect, but certainly not spot on. Is that what you're saying?
Well, probably I would say it's like both and. In other words, like, is it something in the future? Yes. Is it also something current though and present now? Yes, as well. In other words, like, it was if it was significant for the very first Christians, why was it significant? Because they recognized in those symbols and people circumstances that they were living out then.
So,
And I think
go ahead.
yeah. No, and so I think it's the same thing for us today. It's like we can recognize people that might be, quote, the fulfillment of Revelation today, but it doesn't mean that it's not something that's going to happen down the road as well.
I'm going to ask you a question, and this is going to sound snarky or negative, and it's really not. It's curiosity. But how confident are we that what we think we know about Revelations or our translation is actually accurate? Like, what's the chances that we just have it completely because it is so complex, right? Like, what's the chances it's just we're completely going down the wrong path and we have no idea? Like, how confident are we?
Yeah. So on an individual level, probably there's very little confidence. Like, I think you could take any one person and say, like, how sure are you? Like, I don't know. Like, maybe I am getting it wrong. Like, I need to. And on the other hand, there's like, well, this is why Christians would tell you this is why Jesus founded a church as a community to keep the source of truth together and to have an authentic somebody to refer to say, hey, are we getting this right? And so for Catholic, that's the whole idea of the Pope and the Magisterium is like there is somebody who is guaranteed by the Holy Spirit to get it right. Because left up to our individual, thoughts and opinions, like there's zero guarantee I have it right, But I don't know. So again,
I think it's fair to say that lots of Catholics get Catholicism wrong. Lots of Christians get Christianity wrong, and maybe as many get it wrong as get it right. I think that's one of the big knocks on, Catholicism or Christianity. And one of the things I've heard really well said, I think Christian, maybe by you, is that we're a church run by humans, right? Like that's.
Yeah, I mean, we do consulting for the Catholic Church and other churches, this is also funny. Like, you don't have to be perfect to be a good person, if that makes sense. Like, you still make mistakes. Even people who've been proclaimed saints, like, Mother Teresa, I'm sure she made mistakes. Right? So holiness is not the same as not making mistakes. But yeah, I agree, John. I mean, you can get Christianity wrong and really important things wrong. I mean,
But Randy, back to your point about like Revelation. I don't know about you, but Randy, some of the symbology in Revelation is really disturbing for me. Like it's not just the hardest to understand book. For me, it's the hardest to read. It's the most uncomfortable. It's the most like, and Kristian, when I heard you say today, and for the first time I've heard it described as for the everyday person, like, ouch, that one hurt a little.
So,
yeah, look, I'm not that person from the early century who understands it either. So yeah, I agree. But, Babylon for them was a real city that had existed not too long before that, and they all understood what Babylon was. For us, what is Babylon? Well, it's some sort of, future city, is it Dubai? Is it, whatever? Like people equate it to some sort of city that they think is really bad. Um, in a sense, you could look at it from a symbolic point of view as just any system that treats people as cargo, any human city, so to speak, that is. And in fact, Augustine speaks about the two cities all the time. He talks about the city on the hill, right? The city of God and the city of man. And the city of God is like what's pulling us upwards. Like Randy said, like what's trying to make us better, what's trying to help us be more, more charitable, more loving to each other. And the city of the world, of the flesh, of, this pulling us down, this trying to, so there's always like that struggle and that idea of a city, right? But yeah, the symbols are weird, and the whole thing, the demon and all the horns and all these different things, like it's definitely not.
Let's dig
today.
into these, okay? By the way, one more thing on the human thing that John said, or just a follow up on that. I think this is human nature, and I like the phrase of the church is made up of people, or whatever that was exactly. We still have human nature, right? And I even think about, I'm kind of following what's going on a lot with the pyramids right now, and I don't know if you guys have heard this, but they've now got this sonar that can go underground, and they've found all of these huge rooms, I think something like 600 meters down, that they have been saying weren't there, right? And people have, I've heard people theorizing this, and the experts have fought back, pushed back. Like, there's a thing for a lot of people that really want certainty, right? And so that should be no different with the church or the Bible or the message, right? That, even though there's all this new technology that shows there's these massive underground rooms that nobody knew existed, the traditional people are pushing back. So I think that's only normal. But let's get into the big hits.
Well, hey, Randy, before you do that, as the least educated one here on Revelations, having never read it or studied it, but in doing some research around the subject in the last few weeks, I just want to make sure I understand, if I'm completely off base, please tell me. But the way I kind of look at this time and situation, the churches, if you will, the centers of power, these 7 churches or 7 centers of power, were, as you said earlier, Kristian, were kind of just going off doing their own thing. And this really, seems like a warning and a promise. The warning is, if you continue down these paths and you're not centered around, the teachings of Christ, it's all going to fall apart, and it's all going to become Babylon, and it's all just going to dissipate, and we're going to lose our way. And on the other hand, there's real promise here. Is if we do follow the teachings of Christ, if we do, more good than evil, then, Christianity will win out, will expand, will grow, and the world will be a wonderful place. Seems like that's what this message is. And the last thing I'll say is, no one was reading this 2,000 years ago or 1,800 years ago because they were illiterate. This was everything that is written here was being spoken by the leaders of the various churches. People weren't sitting at home with their iPads, flipping through Revelations and then going back on and saying, "Well, I wonder what that meant. I wonder what that meant." Right? These were teachings. Right. And we've all had teachers that have biases and have interpretations, and it was in multiple languages and so on and so forth. So it's not a crystal. I'm sure it wasn't a crystal clear, textbook back in the day. So I don't know. I find it. I think. Yeah. I think I'm not exactly on it, but that's kind of the way I see it.
Yeah. It's a messy business, right? Trying to, like you said, today you can have some direct contact with writings and things like that, and back then it was letters that were being mailed on boats and camels and whatever across the Mediterranean. And you're right, they were written in whatever language, and whoever could read that then would read it. In fact, in the we still do it at church today. A Catholic churches and all churches, right? There's a Bible reading today, and then there's an interpretation of it, an explanation of it, and so that's more or less, I guess, perfect, you could say, or accurate based on the person's understanding and their own closeness to Jesus and those things. And so, yeah, I think you're right, Anthony. It's not a clear, easy process, and it still isn't. And so, what you said earlier too, I think is important. That like there is a promise too, which is that if we're faithful to Jesus, like He won't leave us alone. He won't abandon us, and that's, I don't know. I always think of that when it comes to the whole tales of abundance, like, what more abundance is there than somebody promising eternal life and and a beautiful, wonderful life here if we follow those teachings? And you can see it, I think, like when war comes around, when things happen, and I get it, like nobody's perfect, but at the same time, like, man, if we follow Jesus's teachings more to the letter, I think our world would be a lot better place.
My wife would be shocked if I didn't jump in here for her benefit and just call out. There was a Catholic priest who did on video a homily this weekend or last weekend, or at least it showed up in my Facebook feed recently, where he walked through the song by Taylor Swift, "The Fate of Ophelia," and talked about how God's love pulls people out of the desperation that Taylor's describing in "The Fate of Ophelia." And my wife found this and was so impressed by the fact that he's able to tie in the Bible to Hamlet to Taylor Swift. And I just wonder, it was like people in the pews that were probably not expecting a Taylor Swift homily, and words that I never thought I'd put into the same sentence in my lifetime.
That's
Sorry, I'll let
hilarious.
it back to our
Yeah,
regularly
yeah.
scheduled programming.
That sounds like good preaching. I should go look for that one. Yeah.
Randy's rolled his eyes at me like 4 times.
No, 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 not at all. I'm fine. But Anthony, your insight, I think, is really excellent. It helped me, right? The way you looked at it, because I even in researching this, I had some conversations with AI that usually give me pretty quickly. I can get to the core of things, and with this, the more I talk to AI, I almost got more confused, and it is. It's a tough topic. So let's get into the big hits, right? So some of the
Okay.
weird things. You already mentioned about the demon. I assume that's what you're talking about, the mark of the beast, the 666, right? That's what you're referring
Yeah.
to there?
Yeah. I mean, I'd have to go through all the details, but yeah, there's, which, what was, by the way, like just starting because there's three numbers, right? Like 666, all the numbers in biblical terms are symbols more than mathematical numbers. Like their understanding in the Middle East wasn't, certainly wasn't mathematical to the degree we have it today, after the scientific revolution of the Enlightenment and all those things. But anyways, I want to go to your questions.
Is a symbol of what? Do we know?
I
We
mean,
have theories?
essentially, yeah, I think essentially it's evil. I mean, at the end of the day, again, the whole book of Revelation is talking about the devil and evil versus, Christ and God and good. And I have to go back. Let me pull up my Bible real quick and look at that one exactly.
Well, while you're pulling that up, one of the things I found in research on this is it says in some manuscripts the number is 616, not 666. I've never heard that. What is that about?
Means that Grand Rapids, Michigan is not a great place to be in the winter.
I'm gonna
Sorry.
assume that's the zip code there.
This is, yeah, the area code, yeah.
Okay.
So
Sorry.
apparently,
To my friends in Michigan. Sorry about that.
So I think that difference just goes back to variations in translations again, because there's the Hebrew versus the Greek. I don't know exactly how they get those differences, but I think in the code, the understanding was it was transliterated from Greek into Hebrew, but it was basically standing for Nero, right? So Nero was the Caesar at the time, who was a persecutor of Christians and seen as kind of the embodiment of evil to Christians of the time. So the archetype of the beast, which is the demon, with the 6 heads, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't know all the details of why the 666 came to be that, but I have to go back and look at the and you've seen actually sent me some of these studies on math and the numbers in the Bible, but they're transliterating from the Greek and the Hebrew. So also it's you got to say like anytime there's multiple numbers, Jesus does this a lot. He'll use like 7 is an interesting number. So 666 is triple six. So 3 is the number of the divine. So it's like but it's short of 7, which is the perfect number. So there's 7 days, which is, and Jesus rests on the seventh day. Jesus says to forgive 7 times 70. So it's like the symbol of fullness and perfection. And 6 is not that. So it's reminding us like the angels are fallen, or rather the devils, the demons are fallen angels. And so they're not, they're very powerful, but they're not the same as God, essentially.
So Chinese or Asian numerology maybe isn't as crazy as everybody thinks it is. Like Christians have their
Well,
own version.
probably not. I mean, in a sense, like math does, represent so much in the natural world. And I think, again, that's why those were probably things that most people at the time understood pretty quickly. Like, I don't know what was the thing this year? It was the whole 6-7. Like, so that's an interesting thing, cultural phenomena that happened this year with, I guess, middle schoolers mostly. I don't know who, but where numbers became a symbol for something. And so was it
It
the
was a
numbers
basketball
themselves?
player, and then it became something that meant nothing, and it was a great way to
Oh,
get my son to roll his eyes at me. It was awesome.
All right.
there you go.
By the way,
Yeah.
you mentioned Nero. Nero is one of my, I probably don't dislike him as much as Keynes, but he is the one that ruined the Roman. I mean, he ruined their money. He's the one that started
Yeah.
devaluing and had everybody turn in their silver. And
Yeah.
he said, okay, we're going to reinstate this with my face on it because he wanted a new palace. He had wars he wanted to fund. So people turned in the denarii, which were like 98% silver, and he sent it back out at 92 or 94% silver. It's early money printing. Now we just change
Right.
numbers on a machine, but they were inflating the money supply. So damn Nero. Okay, so back then they thought Nero was the beast or the devil or whatever. Okay, that kind of warms my heart a little bit. It gives me a bit more
The incarnation.
humanity.
Yeah. Yeah.
These days you hear it's Bill Gates or Elon Musk or Donald Trump or this person or this person or this person, or you hear, they're putting they're going to microchip us, right? And that's going to be the number, this 666 thing. I mean, where do those come from, or why? Why do people think that?
There's always a desire to understand the Bible in today's reality. And so, in a sense, I think it's just natural that we do that. I think people do take it too far sometimes and try to say, like, again, they usually do it by their political camp or group, what have you. And I think there's some truth to that, but also it can be taken too far. You look at this all the time, like people are doing really bad things and trying to justify it based on the Bible somehow. And so for me, I think it's important to like keep my faith as the guiding principles of my life and then inform what the decisions I make, including political decisions, as a lower tier, so to speak, with and not confuse, not try to justify like grabbing the principles I want and cherry picking them to say, hey, I want to vote for this person or whatever it is, or do this thing, because I think that's a really dangerous use of the Bible and Christianity and religion in general, any religion for that matter. But I think people do that a lot. So
People are doing it right now, and I don't want to get political on this, so I'm going to keep it super neutral. But with all the gun control stuff, I'm watching in front of my eyes. The left and the right are switching their beliefs on gun control, just like they did on free speech and a bunch of other things. That's happening. That's now people justify whatever it is to try and their team to win. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and so a lot of people are looking at like whoever again it is they're trying to demonize they're like he's the Antichrist, and or they'll look at well, I've actually had theologians explain. I remember when this was a very conservative Bible study I was in at one point, and this theologian was explaining Revelation, and they said, "Oh, so obviously Biden is the Antichrist," and because they were, that was their political view. And he was like, "No, no, it can't be because he doesn't fit all the criteria for an antichrist. And one of the biggest things is there's going to be a time of suffering and whatnot. And you're like, are any of you guys really suffering? They're like, no, we're all doing just fine. It's like, yeah, it's impossible. Like, he couldn't possibly fulfill all the things. And again, they were trying to cherry pick. And so somebody who's attentive is like, no, look at the details. You've got to read and this is an important thing in all biblical interpretation. I think of any book or any person for that matter is look at the whole story. Like, don't take one line or one phrase or one tweet and just take it out of context and say that's this person or that's what this means. Like, you've got to look at the context as a whole. Very, very important, I think, when you're reading a book as complex as the Bible or a series of books, really, right?
And that's where things get, weaponization is a really dangerous thing to relationships in general. And so if you were going to talk to people that weren't committed Christians or Catholics about Revelation, how do you engage with people in a way that is, because I get people that occasionally will tell me like, hey, Catholics believe this or Christians believe that. And to me, I always want to engage. I want to know, like, where did you hear that? What do you understand about that? And if there's things I don't know, I'm not going to argue with people about it. But I at least want people to know that I don't talk about cherry picking, but it's true that people will go and they'll take part of the message, not the whole message, and that leaves out the context, which changes the message pretty radically. What have you found ways that you can draw people in a caring way to that conversation without necessarily trying to change their beliefs, but just helping them understand at least your point of view?
Yeah, I think the most important thing is, like you said, listening to their story and trying to understand. Hey, so a great phrase to use is, hey, instead of putting a label on yourself or trying to put a label on me, how about we share stories? Like, I'd much rather hear the story than the label because it just doesn't tell me much. Whether you're conservative, progressive, this or that, like whatever these labels people throw around. In the Catholic world, they'll be like, are you an Orthodox Catholic? I'm like, well, what does that mean? I mean, tell me what it means to you and what's the story behind that question even. Or are you whatever? So that's the best way I think to draw them in is just, it takes time, it takes energy to sit down and listen to their story, but you almost always get to a better understanding then. And I've heard bishops say the same thing and people who really attacked them for different decisions they had made. And then they finally had time to sit down and listen to each other's story. They're like, oh, that makes a lot of sense, actually. Now I understand where you're coming from. And they got past a lot of those different issues. And so, yeah, there's all kinds of ways to draw people in, but it's only by being, I say specific ways, but it's like opportunities, I guess. But it's certainly not going to be by just throwing more labels and like, hey, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong. It's only by listening to people.
So the microchips, like that's
yeah.
I've been hearing that for 20 years or 30, I don't know, a long time, right? They're
yeah.
going to get microchipped. Is that,
yeah.
where does that come from? Is that in the scripture? Is that?
Well, microchips certainly didn't exist 2,000 years ago. I mean, I don't know when they were created, but again, that's a modern interpretation of, hey, that could be a mark of evil on people is getting microchipped. I certainly don't love the idea of getting a microchip, kind of like you do for a pet these days or things like that. Although I don't know, John's more in the medical world. Like medically, that might be really helpful. Actually, I mean, just like a pet can't speak, if they're found on the side of the road, like if I'm unconscious, would that help medical experts? So I don't know. There's a whole argument around that whole thing, but could it be an explanation or I guess incarnation of what Revelation is talking about? Sure, it could be. Is it? I don't think, like, that's where the argument needs to happen, right? Or the conversation rather than arguments. Like, because again, that didn't exist before. So what would Revelation say about that overall if I were trying to just look at it from a big picture perspective? Again, the kind of principles or first principles is like, evil does exist in the world. It's going to look different at different times. Is this specific thing evil or not, or helpful? Like that's where the conversation needs to happen. So
Yeah.
I don't think it's going to make a specific. It'll help you get close to it, but it's not going to. The Bible and Revelation are not going to help you actually know exactly what technology or thing today is good or not.
I recently listened to an interview with Ray Kurzweil, and Kurzweil has been better at predicting the future than I think any person that's ever lived. And he, I mean, some of his predictions are just amazing how accurately he hit them and how early he made them. He made it sound like it's just a given that we are going to have a brain interface with AI. And it makes sense. His point is, we used to type in the computer. Now more and more people are talking, and because that's more efficient. And he's like, we're not very far from you are just thinking and sending what you want to AI, right? Which
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know if that
AI is.
that's scary to me. But on the other hand, think
Yeah.
how damn smart, how much more productive we would be, the abundance it could bring to the world. But it also does have the threat of, I don't know, can somebody hack it or take control? So
Right, right.
very
Yeah, AI is probably more of an issue for humans in a sense of what to do with it and how to use it and all those things than a microchip would be. Like you said, I mean, a microchip probably has limited information. Seems pretty much unlimited. So what do we do with that? I mean, I think again, Revelation would say, okay, here's all these new things coming out, all this new technology. Progress isn't necessarily good, right? Like human progress isn't guaranteed to be a good thing. And I think there's always unintended consequences and negative side effects that we weren't able to see. I mean, you look at them like the amount of pollution that was caused by the Industrial Revolution, right? And people's early demise because of it and things like that. I think now that's pretty just, known information that at the time nobody could foresee happening. I don't know, maybe automobile deaths or something like that, right? Ford didn't know that was going to happen, but unintended consequences. And so those are mitigated down the road as we understand them. What does the Bible and Revelation tell us? It's like you've got to really look at what's what and try to see, is it truly helping human progress and understanding what humanity is and what it needs, and understanding there's always going to be this is one thing that I think I've heard not spoken enough about in some of the AI conversations is that AI is going to be a reflection of humanity because we're creating it, and it's going to have the good inclinations and it's also going to have the negative inclinations we have, unless we're really careful about separating those things and trying to feed it towards the good. I think that's the desire of most people. But if you just kind of leave it up to itself, it's not going to be a guarantee that it's all good. At least that's my take on it.
let's move to the Four Horsemen, right? So this is something we've all heard it, right? It's been in movies. I mean, Notre Dame had a backfield that was the Four Horsemen at one time, but I don't know that I've ever had any clue what this actually is or what it means. So, is it the apocalypse? I mean, what is the Four Horsemen? Let's start there. What is the Bible talking about, or what do we think it's talking about?
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing about the Four Horsemen is these are, again, I guess you could call them not imaginary. That's saying like the Bible is just made up, right? But imaginary in the sense of symbolic people. Let's call it symbolic more than imaginary. That are different. So let's go through who they are. So there's the a white horse, the rider with a bow and the crown, riding out to conquer. The sword, right? The one with a pair of scales, and the one that's basically death, right? So I think looking at who they are in today's world is going to be a stretch to say exactly who they are, but they're so in Orthodox Catholic history and reading, right? So you're in Revelation 6. They're the end of the world icons, but they're also the forces of history that God allows to run their course to bring the world to that up until the end of time. And so maybe I should say a little bit more about that. Like in the Catholic world's understanding, we actually are in the end of times because Jesus starts the last part of history. So it actually says when Jesus is born in the Gospels that at the fullness of time, the angel Gabriel comes to Mary. In other words, like all of history that happened before then was leading up to Jesus's coming into the world as God made man. And so all the history after that is already in the end times. So we're technically part of the end times now. So these are during this period of history, the idea is these forces of good and evil are allowed to run about basically up until the actual end times when Jesus comes back and brings all of history to a close, and there's the final judgment, and we all live in eternal life or eternal death, right, based on our actions. Does that make sense? So just to kind of put the whole thing into perspective. So these are, again, different symbols, the different writers that are coming out. So we'd have to get a little bit more into the details about each one, but that's the basic understanding is these are powerful forces that are, right around doing their thing.
So, okay,
Does that make sense?
For some reason, I guess I thought the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse were all quote unquote bad guys, right? I mean, there's a whole debate and semantics there, but we're just going to call them that for simplicity. But what you're saying is that's not the case. There's
No, I think you're right. So let me see here. Let me look at my notes here. So thanks for giving me a little heads up on this because it is complicated. So the white horse is apparently conquest, right? The red horse is civil war, bloodshed.
Basically fighting
right.
back. Basically fighting back.
The black
the
horse.
white horse starts it. The red horse fights back. Right?
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, the black horse is famine, economic injustice.
Yeah, the outcome of war.
Right,
What
it's
happens,
the scales,
what
the
happens
balances.
At the end of war, right? People are impoverished
Right.
and what have you. And
Yeah. And the pale horse, the last one is death. So the result, all of the result of all of that, like you're saying, Anthony, is death.
Again, very insightful, Anthony. Very good.
Yeah.
I did my
He's looking at it rationally.
Well, I'm because I'm not in it. I'm interpreting from 50,000 feet, and I'm being educated by the research. There's a line in some of the research, and I'll just say what it says. It says, the bottom line, they're not monsters, but Revelation's way of saying this is what happens when human power rides unchecked through history. And I think it's really revelatory when you think about the last 2,000 years. That's pretty well recorded history of what's gone on, right? And what continues to go on.
Well, to your point too, Randy, the economic part is real. So Nero devalued the coin of the day and led to quickly towards the demise of the Roman Empire. And the economic power has been wielded all throughout history and continues to be as a way to rule and control people. And so the result is bad for everybody. Eventually the people who are doing it fall too. But people keep doing it.
It's a different kind of conquest. I mean, we think of conquest as kinetic war, right? But, in today's world, economic conquest, and I could go on about this for a long time, some of the stuff happening in, especially poor African countries or wherever, that, there's multiple countries that have created economic war. So, Anthony, you got more of these insights? You keep going. You got good questions.
Well, everything you said is nothing new. Nothing. everything that is new was old. And I was as we were talking about propaganda, and we've talked about social media a million times. I was sitting here thinking, how did people get their information many years ago? Just a different version of an echo chamber, right? Depending on what their belief system was, they went to a place, generally speaking, on Sundays or Saturdays or Friday nights or whatever, and they got their information from an echo chamber. And then they set out to live their life. And we've had nothing but conflict. We are not getting better at being good people. Thank you, Christ, for coming, but shit, we're not making progress. In my opinion, I think as you know, I'm a pretty heavy pessimist right now. I'm working on it. I'm getting therapy, but that's where I am. But we're not getting better. We're just not.
I want to push back on the not getting better because A, life is a lot easier. B, when you look at like people living in poverty, that number has been dropping and dropping and dropping.
Yeah.
The same thing
You're
with
missing
people
my
dying
point.
in war.
As usual,
and
you're
number of
missing
slaves.
my point. My point is not not that. Not that we have a easier life and that we can take care of
Objective.
more people. The consolidation of power, or the desire for the consolidation of power, is greater today, in my opinion, than it was in the quote unquote most evil time people think of, at the beginning of World War II. China and its allies have their mission of consolidating power. We, meaning the Western world, developed world, have ours, and it includes, taking advantage of, emerging countries and so forth. Europe has its approach. Everyone, and we were going to talk about Davos in a later event, but everyone is, chasing after economic power so that they can control their populace. And they've got better tools today to do it than they had, in the first century, right? They had metal swords and stones and catapults. Now we have AI. Now we have AI and social media and all kinds of technology and whatever we used in Venezuela to disable an entire city in seconds that no one's talking about except the quote-unquote commander-in-chief. So the tools are much better now, and I'm just fearful. And I'm actually hopeful. Believe it or not, I'm hopeful because there are 3 or 4 axes of power, and if they can all basically balance each other out, because of the mutually assured destruction theory, then maybe we battle around the edges. We don't have an Armageddon. You know what I mean? Maybe we fight over Ukraine, and maybe we fight over who's going to control the oil in Iran when that group falls, and so on and so forth. But it's not a world war. It's not an Armageddon. So a little bit of rambling.
Well, Anthony, the hopeful thing in Revelation is that these 4 horsemen, these different powers, which you're very right are just as real today, are on a leash. And Christ came, and so even though they are running out there doing their things, they aren't going to have the final word. And this is always the tension of like, hey, but like you said, like Christ came, what the heck? It still doesn't look very good. and so in a sense, like human nature doesn't change. Right? Human nature is still corrupted. It's still messed up. It's still not, Catholics believe it's not fully corrupted. That was kind of a Luther brought that idea out. But Christ came to save us because we needed a savior, frankly. And we still do need a savior, frankly. And we can't do it on our own. And if we ignore those teachings and just do whatever comes to us, we're just going to be like those 4 horsemen out there. My mom was always, it's money, sex, or power. If they're looking for one of them or all 3, right? And so how do you have that hope? I mean, I love that you do. For me, the faith is the part that gives me the hope. not in humanity at all, but in, okay, we do have a savior who ultimately will come back, and ultimately that's the law that will guide us. So whether we have an Armageddon or not, like, all of us are going to go at some point. Like, you know, even the guys that are talking about us living, quote, forever, that's like, it might be 150 years, right? Or the whales, I guess, or what, 700 years, whatever it is. Not that I would necessarily love to live 700 years. Like, why? But but I think in this fallen world, it's like, that was what Revelation came to, or is like supposed to tell us, is like, hey, keep trying, don't give up. And I don't think you are giving up, Anthony, but just because I know you. But I think yeah, it's pretty bleak out there when you look around, and there's still hope, right?
So first thing, 700 years. I got a lot of stuff to do, so I'm going to need 700 years to get all this done. But
I don't know if we
you
can
know, one of the
take-
things that I read in researching and trying to prepare and understand this is AI. In my conversation, was talking about how one of the theories is that it's patterns more than specific events, and you've been kind of hitting on that
Yeah.
in a few different ways as you went. I mean, I think that's what you're saying, but it makes me think about the fourth turning, right? And a lot of, we're the whole fourth turning, like, I think we're late. I believe in the fourth turning. I think we're late in it, but we're early into the first turning, I think. And so, late in the fourth turning, Anthony, we go from peak centralization, peak control, peak authority and then early in the first turning, like, one of these turnings happened when America was founded, and there were rebellions in France and the Jacobite Revolution and with the Scottish and all these different things going on, and there were other rebellions around the world. Like, we're moving to mass decentralization, which to me is a big part of my Bitcoin. I mean, it's there's a financial part, but for me, the fact that it can change the world and take us away from that authoritarian mass centralization into decentralization and fixing the money so that Nero can't take the silver out, or in this case, they can't print more, is a big deal. So my question is, where in Revelations does it talk about Bitcoin being the, no, okay, I'm joking. I don't know. Does that
But
make
to your
sense
point,
to you, the cycles and, like, the fourth turning?
yeah, I haven't read that book or seen that as much, but I've heard about it, and I do think you're right. It is about patterns, and there's patterns of these evil forces that you can see in different times throughout history, and you can see those patterns repeating themselves today. Definitely agree with you on that. And yeah, there wasn't Bitcoin, but there were gold coins, and it's interesting. Like, there's this force in Christianity that is very revolutionary. Um, in fact, you see it constantly playing itself out in different ways. And so Nero was afraid of Christianity and tried to persecute it, right? And other emperors have, and other presidents and other people at different times, different groups, because there is this very strong force in it of kind of pushing back against the system, against these fallen human things, and against this control. And so, sometimes it's Christianity gets too much in bed with the powers that be. I think that was kind of the case in, not kind of, definitely in the Middle Ages and times like that, where it was so close it was hard to distinguish the two. And then when Christianity becomes too much part of the culture, so to speak, it doesn't actually help us fight against the bad parts of our culture and government and things like that. So yeah, I agree with you, though. I mean, it's hard to know exactly. In my mind, it's always hard to know exactly where we're at in all those turnings and things like that. But I think the fact that you can see these patterns in just from a purely kind of human scientific point of view or historic point of view makes sense, and the fact that Revelation was talking about these patterns, 2,000 years ago, I think is really interesting.
So I've got a bunch more Revelations questions, and we can circle back to those. But I want to make sure we get Anthony's question. Do you want to ask your faith question, Anthony?
Well, I don't really don't want to put Christian on the spot, but in the context of what we've been talking about, and in your life, in really from the time you were very young to today, you've had a very religious journey, and just during that time, you've gone through a lot of different situations and so forth. And you mentioned faith earlier. Was there ever a time where your faith was really shaken to the core, and you almost abandoned your faith?
Yeah, well, I didn't almost. I did for at least a year or more. I mean, the biggest time it was shaken when so like you said, I grew up in a very Catholic family. They call it cradle Catholic. So I was baptized very young. Both my parents were Catholic. You know, we were always going to church. You know, I kind of rebelled a little bit, but not seriously ever throughout high school. And then I joined seminary right after high school. And so I did all my seminary training in Rome and New York first and then Rome. And so, you know, I was very much into that culture and that environment. And when I realized in when was it, 2017, that, no, it was earlier than that, 2012, sorry, 2012, that I didn't feel called to be there anymore. I didn't think God wanted me to be there. And I left. I came back to Austin and I started looking for a job. That's eventually when I met John. He was mentoring me in a lot of ways in the business world and those things. But that year and a half, I was really, in hindsight, I think I was really angry with God. I was angry with the church. I felt like I'd been kind of abandoned, even though I had asked to leave, but I felt very, very far from God. And I basically just stopped all my religious practice. I wasn't going to church. I wasn't praying. But yeah, I mean, in a sense, like that was the time of my rebellion in a sense. And maybe it was like, I don't know, looking back, maybe I needed to, in a sense. They say there's this boomerang effect when kids go to college a lot of times. They kind of like, they're just becoming themselves. They're trying to understand their own life. But I'd been so into that system and mode of thinking. I, you know, it's hard to say. I did things I wasn't proud of in that time. Like, so I'm not saying I needed to do that, but maybe I did. I felt like in a way I needed that time just to kind of distance myself and figure out, okay, away from that system, who am I? What do I actually believe? And eventually I came back to my Catholic faith, Christian Catholic faith. But it was a year and a half, at least I'd say, that was really, really hard. And partly it was just like understanding how hard it was. I came back and I was like, okay, I can't do this. I need my faith. Like, it was so stable for me. It was so helpful. And I did believe in it intellectually, but my heart came back to it as well. And gradually I kind of slowly warmed up to coming back to church and living my faith again and starting to pray again. And this time it was as a lay person, not as a priest, not as somebody in the system, but as just a normal person. So it was really, really hard. But on the other hand, I think it was necessary time of just kind of purification and getting away from the kind of systems to just who am I individually and my direct relationship with Jesus. That was really, really helpful in the end.
Not to put you on the spot, but to put you on the spot, was there a fuse that got lit that, you know, created the impetus to leave, and then there was a person, place, a thing that made you question whether or not you wanted to
Yeah.
remain, and then more importantly than that, was there a person, place, or thing that was like the seminal moment that said, I'm going to give this I'm going to not only just give this another shot, I'm really going to jump back in with both feet.
Yeah, actually, I mean, yes to both those questions. So, you know, there were a lot of things that, although in hindsight, I think, well, actually, even at the time, like I remember thinking from the time I was in high school or before, I really wanted to be married. I wanted to have kids. I wanted to, that's just where I felt called. And when the first priest who tried to recruit me, so to speak, for the seminary came and spoke to me, that's what I told him. I was like, priesthood is the last of my options. I want to get married first, but I had kind of the profile they were looking for and skills they were looking for. And so I think they were kind of on that, you know, wagon of, hey, we got to get as many people in seminary as we can. So, all throughout my seminary formation, I still had that thought, but I was trying to give God, quote, the first chance. And so a lot of things happened right after my ordination, the biggest thing was the founder of our specific religious order, Father Maciel, a priest from Mexico, had turned out to be a pedophile. It was this huge case, probably the worst in the church throughout those early 2000s. You can read all about it online. There was a documentary came out about it recently on HBO, I think. But so that was one catalyst. The other catalyst was, or the moment, like you said, the fuse was just really having a harder and harder time being on the same page or aligned with my own superiors, my own, the rector at the seminary and where I was working, and just having a really hard working environment that led me to really go deeper and say, okay, what am I doing with my life here? And so that led me to, but then I got to this discernment place where I was like, I don't want to leave just because, my boss isn't a great boss. Like, he's not a great leader, but, or this other guy had this crisis. Like, what about me and God? And so I had to go through a lot of therapy and good spiritual direction where it was like, I had to kind of strip away all those various elements. What was my mom going to say if I left? What was, all these kind of human things, so to speak, and just get to this place of feeling naked before God, and like, it's just me and God. And at that point, it was really clear, God doesn't want me here. Like, I felt that very strongly. So that was a much harder decision than it was like, what do I do if I leave though? How am I going to support myself? Like, I've never had a job outside of the church. What do I do? I mean, I had, odd jobs in high school and stuff like that. But so that was kind of the catalyst in how to leave. When I came back, it was because friends of mine, including my sister and others, had been saying, hey, hope you're doing well. There's this one retreat. It was called Healing the Whole Person. And it was these retreats they were doing around Austin. So eventually I was kind of curious, and I was kind of, I was kind of fed up of just being this guy with no faith, I guess. And like, I felt like I needed to do something. So I went to this retreat. Turned out it was healing in a lot of ways, and a lot of, it was really interesting. I went and spoke with a priest actually during that retreat. It was very different spiritually speaking. I was not used to it. It was very, what they would call charismatic. So it was a lot of like laying on hands and praying over people and Holy Spirit stuff. And I was used to a very rigid, structured type of Catholicism. It was not at all like that. So it was very weird for me to get into that environment, but it's also very, very healing in lots of ways. And in one way particularly is that I spoke to a priest, and he said, I'm kind of getting this word. I don't know why. I don't know if it has to do with you or just it's a random thought, but I'm hearing the word anger. I was like, anger? What? I'm not angry at anybody. And the more I kind of thought about it and meditated on it for months after that, I was like, yeah, I'm really angry. I feel really betrayed by the church and all these people who, this guy who said he was a holy priest and turns out he's a pedophile. Like, all this betrayal, I just felt tons of anger that I didn't know was there. And so it kind of broke through that wall and barrier that I had built around that, probably to protect myself and my, just as a protection mechanism. And that started to open it up. And gradually from there, I started to, I was going to school at Texas A&M and knew a priest out there. So I went and spoke with him, and just gradually, like, I found a lot of just people who were open and willing to talk and weren't going to judge me for who I'd been or what I was now or any of that, and were just willing to meet me where I was at and hear my story and just kind of love me as I was. And gradually that healing started to happen, and that's when I started coming back to my faith and started going back to church and started praying again. And it looks very different now than before. I used to pray 3 hours a day, or in seminary even more than that. So now, I'll go to church on Sundays. We'll pray. I try to do a little bit of meditation, 10, 15, 20 minutes every day. Those kinds of things. I'll listen to my spiritual podcasts and things like that. But it's much more, I guess you would call like a normal Joe in the pews rather than a priest, obviously.
We really appreciate you opening up like that. It's a tremendous story.
All right, we're out of time, but despite that, I'm going to ask you some rapid fire questions. So these will be just quick. Don't feel the need to go deep on these, because I got about 20 questions left, but there's 3 that I have to ask you before we get done. So the first
All right,
one,
let's see.
I'd never heard of this from Revelation, but this came up in my research. It talks about locusts from the pit, and the answer AI thing did is it says basically that it feels almost psychedelic. Tell me about real quickly about
Locust
the
from the
locust
pit.
from the pit.
I don't know. The first thing that comes to mind is from actually from Moses escaping from Egypt, right? Where the locusts were the plague, one of the 7 plagues they called down upon the Pharaoh in Egypt.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure. Maybe if you eat enough of them, you do get a trip. I don't know. But
All right. Well, anyway, there's something about faces, hair, teeth, scorpions, tails, all this that's in Revelation. I didn't know, but all right, I had to ask. So we went fast. Second one, eating the
Okay.
scroll, and it's sweet. It said it was sweet in the mouth and bitter in the stomach.
Yeah, the
what's
scroll.
that telling us? Any idea?
Yeah, the scroll is Revelation again. I have to go back and look at this, but the scrolls were all the parchments, right? They were scrolls. They weren't books, so they were written on scrolls and written up. And so I don't remember exactly the symbology, except that when I think what it's trying to tell us is there's things that are sweet apparently, but not in reality. Like they look nice, they taste good, but they're not actually good for you. And so you got to be discerning about what you consume, basically. Which, man, in today's digital world, that's a great lesson.
That applies to a lot. There's a lot of wisdom there. That applies to a lot of stuff, from nutrition to the news we
Right.
consume
Right.
to the friends we keep, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, that's a long list. So, all right, good. That was good. All right, let's go. Well, wait. Before I go to this, are Catholics, John, Kristian, are Catholics Seahawks fans? You guys know why I'm asking this? So the Seahawks made the Super Bowl. Catholics got a new pope. The last time the Seahawks made the Super Bowl, new pope. The time before that, new pope. Basically, every time the Catholics get a new pope, the Seahawks make the Super Bowl. So, is this God is a Seahawks fan? You guys are Seahawks fans? Like, what's going
Well,
on?
the last time the Patriots beat the Seahawks in the Super Bowl in Arizona when that happened,
They made it, but they
They
didn't
win.
get the win, huh?
Let's say
Yeah,
they win. They
yeah.
at least make it. So, anyway.
I haven't heard of anything specifically in Seattle that makes them more Catholic, but hey, maybe they
Current
prayed
popes from
more.
Chicago, Bears lost a heartbreaker. I mean, there's so many paths we can go down here.
All
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
All right, and my last question is just, last time we talked about books that weren't in the Bible, and I had no idea. I asked about the book of Enoch, but I had no idea there were books in the Catholic Bible that weren't in the Protestant Bible that, I find that fascinating.
Right.
And then we've got the Hebrew Bible, and, I mean, there's different, the Ethiopian Bible's different, but in this, there's other books, and I had no idea that there's multiple apocalyptic texts, right? The ones that were listed
Right.
were the Apocalypse of Peter, the Apocalypse of Paul, Fourth Ezra, were all supposedly like, what? Do you know anything about those books? And I don't know, I didn't prep you on this, so they're probably...
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, I don't, not specifically individual books, but in general, there were a whole lot of writings. And so the early church, again, this was a lot of work that the early church did, and they all met from all over the Mediterranean. So they traveled together to sit down and say, okay, we've got all these texts, all these writings that are claiming to be, biblical or basically claiming to be part of the Christian teachings. And so we need to look at all of them and find out which ones are and which ones aren't. And so it was a huge effort. And so those are some of those texts that were like considered, that were deemed for various reasons not to be part of the authentic Christian teachings, and then were left out of the actual Bible when they said this is the actual canonical or official books that are going in. I don't know the different reasons. Often it was because those were just local teachings, so they had to be universal to the whole known church at the time, that everybody was using them. They had to also be in accord with what they did know about Jesus's life from the people who were still alive, and they had to be consistent kind of theologically as well. And so a lot of those were kind of Gnostic, which was based on this idea that if you know the right things, then you'll be freed. And it's like knowledge will set you free versus God will set you free, essentially. But anyways, that's my quick take.
Right. For whatever it's worth, AI said the Apocalypse of Peter is wild. tours of heaven, hell, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, and it sounds like that one
Yeah.
was pretty close to making the list. Like that one was,
Yeah.
sounds like one of the last ones cut. So anyway,
Yeah.
John, Anthony, any final questions here before we let Kristian be on his way?
No, I don't have any further questions. I just want to thank him for, coming and helping us out to understand where he's coming from. And I learned a lot by these two episodes. So thank you very much.
Great.
Absolutely. My pleasure.
Again, thank you, Kristian. Listeners, if you're still here, you obviously like us, so download, subscribe, tell your friends, all that good stuff. All that stuff helps. I don't know how the algorithm works, but I trust that it helps us out and helps us grow our audience. So thank you, and everybody have a great day. Listen and subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Click follow for more content like this, or go to talesofabundance.com to join our community and get free tools.